first thing to realize is that both Nazism and Marxism, Leninism, and to some degree Trumpism were worldviews of almost religious scope. In fact, I would say they were of religious scope.
But I'm curious if you have any thoughts about language models and other forms of artificial intelligence when it comes to either contributing to propaganda or combating propaganda.
You know, I haven't done enough thinking about that to have a good answer. I'm a little concerned because those models are easily manipulable and you can, set them up to reinforce existing ideas. So far, I don't see that they've done a whole lot of good in straightening out things, but I don't know enough to really talk with confidence on that. I'm not optimistic.
Yeah, that's a fair take. That is a fair take. Let me move on. I feel like I asked you one question and then we got into the weeds on it. So let me see if there's any of these that I should touch on. I am a little curious about the differences between East and West German propaganda. Some people in my community mention things such as architecture and the kind of brutalist Soviet architecture in regards to propaganda. I'm curious if there are any glaring similarities, differences in the way that they conducted these kind of propaganda campaigns.
I've got a book on that, Bending Spines, the Propagandas of Nazi Germany and the German Democratic Republic, which goes into it in obviously a little more depth than we would have time to do here. But there were a lot of similarities. I mean, the first thing to realize is that both Nazism and Marxism, Leninism, and to some degree Trumpism were worldviews of almost religious scope. In fact, I would say they were of religious scope. I mean, if you look at American politics in the past, politics was relatively low involvement. I mean, people tended to be Democratic or Republican, but if you were Republican, that didn't automatically determine the church you went to, or the clothes you wear, or how you build your house, or where you sent your kids to school, and so forth, okay? Relatively low involvement. Now, if you look at both Nazism and Marxism, Leninism, they were worldviews of a religious nature. I mean, I'm Christian and of the Calvinist background, and Christianity is a worldview. I mean, I'm not a Christian simply because I go to church once a week and sit there. I view Christianity as affecting every aspect of my life. Now, that doesn't mean there's clear guidelines, on every single point. But the point is, being a Christian should influence how one relates to other people. It should influence economic life. It should how one uses one's resources, how one lives one's life, okay? Well, both Nazism and Marxism and Leninism forthrightly claimed to be worldviews that affected everything, all aspects of life. It wasn't simply that you voted for Hitler. I mean, when the Nazis took over, they had this program which was used, Glieszt-Schalthung, coordination, in which everything became Nazism. And I mean, by everything, I mean everything. For instance, on my site, there's an interesting article on Nazi interior decoration. And the article says you should be able to walk into a Nazi's house and know that person is a Nazi by the decorations, by the paintings, by the sculptures, by the furniture, and so forth, okay? Mm-hmm. You had the National Socialist chess clubs, because chess was not apolitical. I mean, everything, and the Marxist-Leninists were the same. Everything was somehow involved in the political aspects of Marxism and Leninism. There were worldviews that applied to everything. So both systems were, first of all, worldviews of an almost religious scope. Second is that both then wanted to reinforce that by every method possible. And dissent is always dangerous in those kinds of systems. And then both of them, let's try this first, they both then had absolute claims of truth. Der Führer immer recht. The Führer is always right, was the Nazi point of view. From the Marxist-Leninist point of view, leaders are important, like Stalin and Lenin and so forth, but they're the absolute truth as Marxist-Leninist ideology. That was infallible, absolutely true. So you had absolute standards of truth. Now, the interesting thing is that given that those were human standards, there was no way outside of it. If you take religion, I mean, religion has structures, but it claims ultimately to resist, to rest on some kind of divine support. So, for instance, the Führer is always right. No matter what the Führer said, it was absolutely true from the Nazi point of view. If you look at the Catholics, have the doctrine of the infallibility of the Pope. Well, do you have any idea how often the Pope is spoken infallibly? Give me a guess.
Probably